Good day, everyone. As a part of requirement, I'd be reporting about or giving a profile of Tsutomu Miyazaki, or known as Otaku Murder or the Little Girl Murderer. Now, we'll be using concepts or psychological concepts of Neo-Freudian or the concepts of Neo-Freudian principles that you'll be using. So let's start with the overview or the background of who is Miyazaki or Tsutomu Miyazaki. Miyazaki Tsutomu, age 21, was born on August 1962 and died on 17 June 2008. Miyazaki abducted and killed the girls aged from 4 to 7 in his car before dismembering and sexually molesting their corpses. Miyazaki's crimes included not only kidnapping, murder, and necrophilia, but also vampirism, the preservation of body parts as trophies, and taunting the families of his victims. So he was a Japanese serial killer. During these times, it wasn't really known for Japanese to have these kinds of acts. So, not only a serial killer, but also indulged in cannibalism. He's a child rapist and a necrophile who murdered 4 young girls in Tokyo and Saitama Prefecture between August 1988 to June 1989. Miyazaki was arrested at Shoji in July 1989 after being confronted while taking nude photographs of a young girl. Miyazaki was diagnosed as having one or more personality disorders, but was determined to be sane and aware of his crimes and their consequences. Miyazaki was sentenced to death in 1997 and was executed by hanging in 2008. Now, aside from this, when they caught Miyazaki and went to his house, inside his room, there were extensive collections of pornography and horror videotapes, and then intentionally misled to be anime related by the media and political parties wanting to ban anime and manga, which caused a moral panic against otaku in Japan. So basically, he was the one who sort of gave a bad reputation against otaku. So to give an overview or a background of his profile, Tsutomu Miyazaki was born on 21 August 1962 in Itsukaichi, Tokyo. The eldest son of a wealthy family, Miyazaki was born premature and suffered from a rare birth defect that caused his hand joints to be fused together, preventing him from being able to bend his wrist upwards or rotate. Miyazaki's family operated a regional newspaper company and were well known in Itsukaichi, where his grandfather and great-grandfather had served on the town council. So they were really, really famous in their area, or prominent. Not only just prominent, but they were also wealthy. Now, some sources say that he was a result from an incest relationship, that his father raped one of the older sisters and gave birth to him. That was just rumors. Due to his parents being busy, Miyazaki was mainly raised by his grandfather and an intellectually disabled man the family hired as a nanny. So he had a guy for a nanny. Miyazaki was ostracized when he attended Itsukaichi Elementary School due to his deformity and consequently kept to himself. His rejection caused him to develop an obsession over manga, Manga is what you call comics or fictional comics in Japan. Despite his problems with socializing with other people, he was initially one of the best students in his high school class rather, until his grades began dropping, eventually resulting in him not receiving an admission to Meiji University, a private, prestigious university in Tokyo. So basically, in Japan, people in high school are striving to get an admission inside a university, and one of um, Tsutomu Miyazaki's dream was to get admitted on that prestigious university. However, he did not, or was not admitted, probably because grades wasn't enough or other factors that led him not to be admitted in that university. Miyazaki attended a junior college rather instead and began studying to become a photo technician, um, leaving his intentions of becoming a teacher behind. So Miyazaki wanted to be a teacher, but had to let it go and um, attend the college instead and look for skilled other interests. Miyazaki soon developed an inferiority complex due to the size of his deformity and his inability to socialize with women. Instead, his hobby was to take pictures of female tennis players so he could use them to masturbate. So we'll not dwell into it, but he sort of developed that in starting with these years, and then he was taking photographs of women playing tennis, photographs of their underwear. Miyazaki moved into his parents' house and shared a room with his older sister. Miyazaki's family was highly influential in their town. His father owned a newspaper, but he had no desire to take over his job. Miyazaki would later claim that it was during this period that he began to consider suicide. So, at a very young early age, he already has mental problems, perhaps, or prob- um, or issues. He didn't want the father or inherit the newspaper legacy that his family has, but rather he has a different path. It was rumored that because he had a small penis, that would lead him to be like that, or rather being perverted, sort of to compensate it. But that was mainly his deformity. The insecurities was just mainly his deformity. He was born premature, and he had strange hands where he can't rotate upwards or move it fully or use it fully, and has longer nails like Nosferatu of some sort. Now, according to Alfred Adler, an intense personal feeling, just going to breeze about or explain what is the inferiority complex. Um, According to Alfred Adler, an intense personal feeling of inadequacy, often resulting in the belief that one is in some way deficient or inferior to others. Now, this concept was structured around the need to achieve feelings of adequacy. It tends to compensate to become adequate, but other people tend to overcompensate and highlights their talents and think they're better than other people, which all to hide their weaknesses. So, Alfred Adler also talks about the birth order, since he's the youngest child along with two older sisters. Perhaps um, the gap of the family, her sisters rather, perhaps the gap was really far from him, since he's two older and then he's sort of the youngest among the three. Now in school, now in school, Miyazaki attended Meidai Nakano High School in Nakano, a prestigious high school associated with Meiji University, and was a star student until his grades began to drop dramatically. Miyazaki was ranked 40 out of 56 in his class and did not receive the customary admission to Meiji University for students of the school. Instead of studying English and becoming a teacher as he originally intended, Miyazaki attended a local junior college and studied to become a photography technician. And there was this point that this was this point rather that his hobby was taking photographs of women playing tennis and taking photographs of their underwear while playing. However, he wasn't really satisfied with this in the later parts of his life. So going towards the family, Miyazaki disliked everyone in his family except for his grandfather, who died in May 1988. His death worsened Miyazaki's depression, and so, as a way to retain something from him, Miyazaki ate part of his grandfather's ashes. Uh, Take note that everybody in his family sees him as a black sheep and a handicap. His sisters don't like him, and parents doesn't seem to have time or never gave any attention to him growing up. It was revealed that he was very close to his grandfather and was the only family he felt where he was given support. And what he did was his grandfather was cremated. He ate parts of the ashes there from the cremation, and according to him, it was something that able to retain a part of him from his grandfather. Now, weeks later after this, or his grandfather's death, Miyazaki's sister caught him spying while she was showering, and when she confronted him, he attacked her and his mother after having an argument with her. Now, Miyazaki began collecting the pornographic anime at this point, and adult magazines, violent films, horror films, specifically horror films. It was a it was he was fond of horror movies in different genres, and then eventually upgraded himself into child pornography, which was illegal all around the world. During the investigation, it was gathered around 5,763 videotapes of those things inside his room, aside from the collection of mangas, comics, and other things that he was collecting. His crime. These are the four children that he sort of abducted, killed, and did some heinous crimes. The first one was Mari Kono. On August 22, 1988, just one day after his birthday, Miyazaki abducted a young girl named Mari Kono, while she was playing at this friend's house, and drove her to a wooded area. The two sat in the car under the bridge for several minutes before he strangled her to death, and engaged in acts of necrophilia with her corpse, leaving her in heels near his home, taking her clothes with him. Now, this is the first crime during this time that he was monitoring through the TV. During his first crime, he was monitoring the news, rather. And then the parents were hopeful that the missing child would still be alive. However, Miyazaki sat alongside Kon for half an hour. Okay, so he kept, according to some sources, he kept hearing the parents were very, very hopeful, she'll return, stuff like that. So after hearing this, Miyazaki eventually returned to her and removed the body parts. So he went back to the crime site and removed some body parts, some of her teeth, bones into powder, and placed them in a box alongside with her teeth, pictures of her clothes, and a postcard containing the words "Marry, cremated bones, investigate, prove," which she sent to her own family. Miyazaki kept her hands and feet inside his apartment. I guess that was for her trophy. So, not only that, um, he was, aside from monitoring, rather, he went back to the crime site and took some parts as a trophy, and then other parts sent in a box, and then sent uh, a mail where he wrote down the words "marry, cremated, bones, investigate, prove." So I don't know if he wants to get caught or he's just getting the thrill out of these things. Now, remember, Miyazaki allowed Kono's corpse to decompose for a bit, and then later returning to remove her hands and feet, which she kept in his closet at home. Miyazaki burned Kono's remaining bones in his furnace, ground, and turned them into powder and sent them in a box, along with several teeth and photos of her clothes and postcards. So, this was also proven during the time of investigation when they went to the room that Kono's hands and feet were found in Miyazaki's closet after his arrest almost a year. The next victim that he had was Masami Yoshizawa. On October 3, Miyazaki spotted Masami Yoshizawa on a rural road, offering her a ride and taking her to the same place where he had killed Kana, repeating the same process of strangling the child, having sex with her corpse, and taking her clothes. So he has the same modus operandi or same pattern that he created before murdering his victims. The same thing. And then the next month, so he was doing this sort of ritually then. The next month, Miyazaki was returning from a friend's house when he abducted Erika Nanda and drove her to a parking lot, forcing her to undress and allowing him to take pictures of her nude body before killing her. Miyazaki covered her body with a bedsheet and took her clothes, but later disposed of them in a wooded area, leaving the girl's body in a parking lot. Miyazaki would later send postcards to her family containing the words Erika, cold, cough, throat, rest, death. So he has this pattern of doing this. Now, surprisingly, while I was writing this or gathering some resources, that Miyazaki was returning from a friend's house. So he wasn't really, maybe he had less friends rather, but uh, I think he can still socialize with some aspects, although limited. And the next one, or the last one, was Ayako Namoto. Miyazaki convinced the 5 years old Ayako Namoto to allow him to take pictures of her. Then Miyazaki then led Namoto to his car and murdered her, covered her corpse with a bedsheet, and placed her in the trunk of his car. Miyazaki took Namoto's corpse into his apartment and spent the next 2 days engaging sexual acts with it, taking pictures of it in various positions and filming it. When Namoto's corpse began to decompose, Miyazaki dismembered it, abandoning her torso in a cemetery and her head nearby the hills. Miyazaki kept her hands, drank her blood and cannibalizing them. So basically, he ate some parts of it. Fearing that the police would find the motor's body parts, Miyazaki returned to the cemetery and the hills 2 weeks later and carried the remains back to his apartment. So he carried the decomposing corpse back and forth, where he hid them in his closet. So everything there, he keeps most of the body parts he keeps as a trophy and takes it home. Now on July 23, July 1989, Miyazaki saw two sisters playing in a park in Achoji, Tokyo, and managed to separate the younger sister from the older one, who stayed behind. Miyazaki was taking photographs of the younger daughter, who had convinced to strip nude, when he was caught by their father, who attacked Miyazaki, but was unable to restrain him. Now, other sources were saying that um, the other sister ran to get help and to ask to get help from the father while they were on that area, while the younger one was taken behind and was convinced to take photos, to strip. However, the father caught up with Miyazaki and beat him up, basically, was beating him up, and Miyazaki left. Okay, he managed to run away. Now, after fleeing on foot, Miyazaki eventually returned to the park car rather, to retrieve his car, whereupon he was arrested by the police responding to a call by the father. So, basically, when he left, his his car rather was parked there. The police were hiding knowing that knowing that he would come back for the car, so they hid and then eventually caught him. Now, during the arrest, take note that during the arrest, Miyazaki retained a perpetually calm and collected demeanor during his trial, appeared indifferent to his capture. So, death penalty. Miyazaki's trial began on March 30, 1990. Often talking nonsensical, Miyazaki blamed his actions on the Ratman, an alter ego Miyazaki claimed forced him to kill. He spent time during the trial drawing Ratman in a cartoon form. During his trial, Miyazaki's father refused to pay for his son's legal defense and committed suicide eventually in 1994. That is very old traditional Japanese of dealing with shame. They sort of commit suicide, seppuku, harakiri, either of these terms they do, in order to pay the shame or bring the shame that they brought to the family. And not only that, the mother changed her name, and so would the other sisters, and so would the uncles and other relatives. Basically, since they were very prominent, everybody knows them, and they were also wealthy, so all of their clan basically was disbanded, or all of their clan tried to hide, change names, and forget about the whole thing that links to him. So during the trial, he had no remorse and felt that the court was like a stage and he was a Japanese hero doing a good job. He wasn't apologetic and never was sorry for what he did. He said that he was dreaming when he committed all of these heinous crimes and murders and blaming the rat people. It was a very long trial. It was a 7-year trial focused on Miyazaki's mental state. At that time of murders, under the Japanese law, people of unsound minds are not subject to punishment, and then the feeble-minded are entitled to reduced sentences. 3 terms of court appointed experts or psychiatrists came to have different conclusions about Miyazaki's ability to tell right from wrong. 2 teams determined him to be feeble-minded, 1 team concluding that he was schizophrenic, and the other who had multiple personality disorder, or DID, dissociative. Uh, and the third team found that Miyazaki had a personality disorder. He was still capable of taking responsibilities for his actions. So the Tokyo District Court judged him that he's aware of the magnitude and consequences of his crime, therefore accountable. So he was sentenced to death on April 14, 1997. His death sentence was upheld by both the Tokyo High Court on June 28, 2001, and the Supreme Court Justice on January 17, 2006. Now, Miyazaki wrote a letter to his father blaming him for everything. And he also wrote a letter to his mother, a very strange letter that he was sorry for causing her heartache, and please don't forget to change the oil in his car, or else nobody can use it, something like that. And it was revealed that he started, in the later parts of his life, as the investigation got deeper, that he started killing pets. He started killing 2 cats, and one of the cats was boiled to death rather, and even killed his dog or pet dog when he was younger. So there were already telltales when they investigated earlier. Now, going back to Alfred Adler, looking through, it was mostly the thing here. If you look at or use his concepts, it was emphasized there that he had inferiority complex. It was rumored that it's because he had a small penis, I guess, that would lead him to be like that. But I think it's more of his deformity, insecurities, and there's no social support that he had. Like, basically he had no family, or he can't really talk to his parents about anything, or there was no warmth inside his family. So the dynamics there was already broken. Now, according to Alfred Adler, an intense personal feeling of inequality, the definition of inferior complex is supposed to you're supposed to compensate what you lack for, and sometimes people overcompensate in order to hide weaknesses or their inadequacies. And then there was also a birth order. Now, it was the only male, so looking back at the birth order, he was the only male with 2 older sisters, and I think really the gap was really far from him. He was the youngest male, who was supposed to have a greater role or expectation as for an Asian culture. That's why he was asked by his father, would he be the one or take the next step to run the family business or the legacy that they had. However, he grew up he did not like to take the role, and grew up neglected due to his deformity and absentee parents. He was just provided with his needs, basically, and felt alone except for the presence of his grandfather, which sort of devastated him after his death. Now, Adler identified 3 fundamentals of social tasks that all of us must experience, which was occupational task, talking about career; societal tasks, talking about your role in society; and love tasks, finding an intimate partner for long-term relationship. However, the 3 neither was met of our serial killer, so neither of the 3 was met out of his criteria. Looking at the birth order, the youngest child are often described as spoiled, willing to take unnecessary risk taker, and less intelligent than their old siblings. So psychologists have theorized that parents coddle the youngest child. However, in this case, probably yes, he's a risk taker. I guess spoiled, because he was, like I said, he was just provided. The warmth wasn't there, but being provided with everything. I'm sure that he was provided with his own car, He was provided with his hobbies, collections, and all, and even his own area. It's just that there was no warmth there. So probably we can say that he has everything, including the legacy, the business, the wealth, and everything in it. But he lacks the warmth, the family, and uh, the TLC, as we call it, the tender loving care. So moving forward to Jung's take, Jung also proposed the two attitudes or approach towards life. I sort of focused on the extroversion and introversion, which was Jung's take on it. So Miyazaki was an introvert basically. So it was on the checklist that mostly is being alone, avoids attention, assumes, speaks slowly, stuff. So those are that type of like stereotype of an introvert. Thinks a lot before he speaks, stays on topic, prefers written communication, pays attention easily, and is very cautious. So I was trying to get a sense of either if it really fits. So mostly being alone, even with his family, he was limited to his grandfather, where he felt he was close to it. Wasn't really relating or having something of a connection towards his family. He avoids attention. He stays in his room with all his collections of manga videos and eventually porn collection. There's nothing wrong with porn collection, I guess, but being alone there and trying to avoid attention, I think it's because while growing up, he was very insecure and he was bullied most of the time in school because of his deformity, his hands. Assume, speaks slowly and softly. Since he grew up, he was not really confident. It was safe to assume, I guess, that he was not loud and was mostly hiding or mostly being alone and then socializing. Thinks a lot before speaking to avoid further being a center of attention or being bullied or being a target of being bullied. Stays on one topic, perhaps his limitation, and does not know how to indulge, also how to socialize. Prefers written communication. Even in later years where technology was already there, he preferred to write to his parents, to the victims, although we can argue that it would be sent through mail with those methods in order for him not to be caught. But there were a lot of he likes to write things with his victims, especially to the parents. Other resources would say that he was trying to do a drop call or would just call the parents' house and just listen to the parents and then try to breathe. So I think he was one of those pioneers who just have to prank call somebody and just breathe heavily, listening to the anonymous caller. Pays attention easily. He was paying attention through the news outlets and even monitoring the parents' reactions. He was very meticulous in what he was planning or doing. He's cautious. He was cautious. He was caught after 4 victims. So the persona that he was projecting, or the mask that he was showing, that he was just a harmless photographer who likes to take pictures of kids. Perhaps nowadays that would not work, since people are now very vigilant, especially with the laws of taking photographs of minors. A helpful citizen trying to help kids perhaps get to their houses quickly. I think one of the factors here is in Japan, children are taught to be very independent at a very young age, walking towards school or playing alone at the public park, doing things independently without any supervision of parents. That was I think that still happens, or that's the culture of the Japanese. However, he has a different motive where he would feel empowered or satisfied by his fantasy of power and control, and that's why he would take his victims. Taking on Karen Horney's take, Horney believed that each individual has the potential for self-realization, and the goal of psychoanalysis should be moving towards a healthy self rather than exploring early childhood patterns of dysfunction. She suggested that the normal growth can be blocked by basic anxiety stemming from the needs of not being met, such as childhood experiences of loneliness, isolation, How do children learn to handle anxiety? Horner suggested three styles of coping. So let's try to see which one he was using. First, coping style was moving forward towards people, relies on affiliation and independence. Second coping style is moving against people, relies on aggression and assertiveness. And the third coping style was moving away from people, centers on detachment and isolation. Now perhaps Miyazaki started moving away from people and eventually started moving against people when his grandfather died. He was mostly moving away from society since he's more of bullied due to his deformities and more of a target. And he was taking refuge only with his manga, his hobbies, his fictional comics, and horror movies that he was collecting while growing up, and led to collecting Japanese porn also. So, um, he sort of lost. I think the point there, in my opinion, the point there is during his grandfather, it was a very great loss, or it was the string of humanity that he has left rather that was cut off. That's why he sort of could not handle it and wanted it to retain him through eating. Perhaps that's his way of understanding things. Eating the cremated dust of his grandfather, or part of it. And another take is on Erickson's take on developmental stages. Generally agreed with Freud that childhood experiences matter, and they do, but they decreased the emphasis on sex and focus more on social environment and the effects of culture and personality. Looking through the psychosocial development stages, they were already dysfunctional as a family, and it made it worse when Miyazaki's grandfather died. Looking at the stages of Erickson, it was really tipping at the side, solely making it imbalance. It was like a textbook definition of it, that everything on the versus left side, it was very clear. So from mistrust, shame and doubt, inferiority, confusion, isolation, stagnation, or might have directed towards despair right away. So basically, indeed, there was the childhood there, the uh, development stages during his childhood was very crucial at the point of him growing up and what he is right now, also currently. There's a very textbook of a serial killer also shows the childhood experiences, and the stages there are very significant in a neo-Freudian perspective. With regards to the trial of courts, were they right on this, or perhaps another discussion would be because this is clearly from the onset of it is on the developmental stages. Clearly, he is psychologically incapacitated to do such. However, the court was more of the decision making, or seeing which one is right, if he can discriminate which one is right or wrong with his actions. Perhaps in the later discussions we can add some other of the neo-Freudian from this subject that I chose for our class. So for now, these are the references, and thank you so much, and hope you enjoyed the case that I chose. So hopefully by our class it will be a very fruitful and very eventful discussion, or more of insight with this. Thank you so much, and good night.